In 1956, John Ford publicly humiliated John Wayne in front of over 200 cast and crew, then walked away and let him collapse. 12 minutes later, Wayne delivered the most iconic performance of his career, and it broke him so completely he never spoke about it again. Here's how it happened. Monument Valley, early morning, the set of The Searchers. Wayne stands ready for a pivotal scene. Ford watches from his chair. No warning. No build-up. "You're too soft, Duke," Ford snaps, loud enough for everyone to hear. The crew freezes. Wayne stares. Then he turns and walks off set. In the next 10 minutes, Wayne had two options: walk away, protect the legend, the image, the myth he'd spent 25 years building, or stay and let the man who made him famous tear it all down in public. There was no third option, and whatever choice he made would follow him for the rest of his life. By the end of this story, you'll see the object Wayne kept until his death, the proof of what really happened that day, before that morning in Monument Valley, before the humiliation, before the doorway shot that would define American cinema. There was a partnership. John Ford met John Wayne in 1928. Wayne was a USC football player turned prop boy. Ford was already a feared, Oscar-winning director with a temper that was legend in Hollywood. But it wasn't power that bonded them. It was belief. In 1939, Ford cast the unknown Wayne in Stagecoach, a career-defining gamble. The studio wanted a bigger star. Ford refused. The film made Wayne a leading man overnight. Over the next 25 years, they made more than a dozen films together. Westerns, war epics, character studies. Ford directed Wayne in Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande. Together, they shaped what America thought a hero looked like. But offset, the dynamic was different. Ford called him Duke, rarely praised him, often mocked him, in front of crews, in front of studio heads, sometimes in front of reporters. It was part mentorship, part hazing ritual, and Wayne endured it because he knew something simple. Ford made him better. By 1955, Wayne was no longer a gamble. He was one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. His name alone could secure financing. His face was the American frontier. And Ford was older, quieter between takes, drinking more, watching more. The crew on The Searchers noticed something subtle that spring in Monument Valley. Ford stayed seated longer. He wore his dark glasses constantly. He studied Wayne between takes, not with irritation, but with something closer to urgency. Wayne didn't say anything, not publicly, but he could feel it. Their routine had always been sharp. Ford barked orders, Wayne delivered. Ford criticized, Wayne adjusted. It was controlled friction, predictable, until it wasn't. In May 1955, during production in Monument Valley, something shifted. Ford began pushing Wayne harder than usual, demanding more takes, calling him too polished, too heroic. One crew member later said, "It didn't feel like Ford was directing a performance. It felt like he was trying to break something open." Wayne laughed it off at first. That was the game. It had always been the game. But this time, Ford wasn't playing. And on the morning of the doorway scene, that pressure finally detonated in front of 200 people who would never forget it. If you're getting value from this, hit subscribe. These are the stories Hollywood never told, the ones hiding between the frames. The morning it happened was cold, even for Monument Valley. They were setting up the now famous final shot of The Searchers, the doorway scene, the emotional spine of the film. The moment Ethan Edwards either becomes a monster or something more complicated. Nearly 200 people were on set, crew, extras, studio reps. Word had spread that this was the big one. John Ford sat in his folding chair, black patch over one eye, dark glasses on, silent. John Wayne stood in wardrobe, framed by the cabin door, hat low, shoulders squared, the Duke. Action. Wayne delivered the scene the way he always did, controlled, stoic, mythic. He turns, he pauses, he walks away into the desert. Cut. Silence. Then Ford's voice, loud enough to echo against the rock formations. "You're too soft, Duke." The crew shifts. Ford stands up. "You're playing the hero. He's not a hero. He's a man who's lost everything. If that's all you've got, we're in trouble." No quiet correction, no private adjustment. This was surgical and public. According to crew accounts years later, you could feel the air change. No one had ever seen Ford push Wayne like that in front of this many people. Wayne didn't fire back. He stared at Ford, held it, then turned and walked off set without a word. Now the impossible choice became real. If Wayne walked, production stalled. Delays meant thousands of dollars per hour. Monument Valley wasn't a backlot. It was remote, expensive, brutal. A shutdown could cost the studio a small fortune. But if he stayed and accepted that humiliation, he risked something else: his image. By 1955, Wayne wasn't just an actor. He was a brand, America's definition of strength. Men copied his gait. Boys copied his voice. The press called him the embodiment of post-war masculinity. To publicly crumble in front of 200 people? That wasn't in the contract. The pressure tightened. Assistant directors exchanged looks. Studio reps whispered. Someone muttered that they might lose the day entirely. Then something unexpected happened. Ford stood up, slowly, and instead of calling for the next setup, he followed Wayne. No one moved. No one spoke. The two men disappeared behind a line of equipment trucks parked against the desert wind. What happened in those next minutes wasn't on any call sheet. No cameras, no witnesses. Just the director who had made him and the star who had become bigger than both of them. And when they returned, Wayne's eyes were red. But what Ford said behind those trucks, the part about why he was pushing him that hard, wouldn't become known until years later. It was 11:47 a.m. when John Wayne walked back onto set. No announcement, no speech, just boots in the dust. The crew noticed immediately. His jaw was tighter, the swagger gone, the myth stripped back. Whatever had happened behind those trucks with John Ford, it had landed. Ford was already seated again, dark glasses on, face unreadable. He didn't apologize, he didn't explain. He just said, "Places." Wayne stepped into the doorway. No rehearsal, no adjustment. Action. This time, something was different. The pause lingered longer. The shoulders dropped, not in weakness, but in weight. When Ethan turns toward the desert, it doesn't feel heroic. It feels exiled. A man who knows there is no place for him inside that home. One take. Cut. No one clapped. No one moved. A few crew members later said you could hear the wind again, as if everyone had forgotten it was there. Assistant director Cliff Lyons reportedly leaned toward a grip and whispered, "That's the one." And it was. The cost became visible immediately. Wayne didn't celebrate. He didn't crack a joke. He walked past everyone and sat alone, staring out toward the valley. One makeup artist later recalled that his eyes were wet, but no one approached him. By lunch, the mood on set had shifted completely. No more whispers about delays, no more tension about budget. But what no one knew, not even most of the crew, was why Ford had pushed him that hard. Because behind those trucks, Ford had told Wayne something that reframed everything. He was dying, and this might be the last film they would ever make together. That truth, kept quiet at the time, changes the humiliation into something else entirely. Here's what we didn't know in 1955. John Ford had been diagnosed with cancer. He hadn't announced it publicly. The studio didn't advertise it. Even much of the crew didn't know the full extent of it. But Ford knew. And he believed privately that The Searchers might be the last great Western he would ever direct. Years later, members of Ford's family and close collaborators would confirm that during that period, he had grown intensely focused on legacy. Not awards, not box office, legacy. And behind those equipment trucks in Monument Valley, Ford reportedly told John Wayne something no one else heard. "I don't need the Duke, I need the man." That changes everything. The humiliation wasn't cruelty for sport, it was urgency. Ford didn't want Wayne to protect the myth. He wanted him to outgrow it, and the doorway shot, the one done in a single take, became the proof that he did. Now we move into what happened after the cameras stopped rolling, because the real story isn't just about that one take. It's about what Wayne carried with him for the next 20 years. When production wrapped on The Searchers, nothing outwardly dramatic happened. No press release about Ford's health, no public reconciliation moment, no emotional interviews. On the surface, it looked like just another Ford-Wayne collaboration added to a long list. But something had shifted. In the months that followed, Wayne's performances began to change. The invincible frontier icon gave way, slowly, to something more human, more vulnerable. In later films, the pauses stretched longer. The anger felt lived in, not theatrical. Ford, meanwhile, continued working, but not at the same pace. Health complications mounted, hospital visits increased. Close associates later described him as reflective during this period, sometimes uncharacteristically quiet between takes. The hidden cost wasn't financial, it wasn't contractual, it was emotional. For nearly 25 years, Wayne had relied on Ford as both tormentor and mentor. Ford had built him, film by film, from supporting player to American archetype. But now, for the first time, Wayne had seen him fragile, and that changed the power dynamic forever. Over the next few years, Wayne reportedly visited Ford during medical treatments. Not publicly, not for headlines, quietly. The tough guy persona didn't disappear, but around Ford, something softer had emerged. When Ford passed away in 1973, Wayne didn't give a theatrical eulogy. He didn't turn it into spectacle. But in his private office, he kept something. Ford's director's chair. Not as decoration, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Visitors would later recall seeing it positioned carefully in the room, not hidden away, not center stage either, just present. The loyalty had outlasted the humiliation, and here's what makes that doorway scene hit even harder today. Ford never publicly explained why he pushed Wayne that morning. Wayne never publicly described what was said behind those trucks. The moment that changed them both remained between them. Until years later, when people close to Wayne began connecting the dots and realized that the performance audiences admired wasn't just acting. It was grief, pride, and loyalty colliding in real time. Drop a comment. Would you have stayed on that set or walked away? For years, the story lived as rumor. Crew whispers, second-hand recollections, stories told at industry dinners after a few drinks. Then, after John Wayne died in 1979, visitors to his Newport Beach office described something that stopped them cold. In the corner of the room, near his desk, but not displayed like an award, sat a worn wooden director's chair. The name stenciled across the back, Ford. Not a replica, not a prop. The chair belonging to John Ford. It had followed Wayne for years. Assistants later said he refused to throw it away. When offices changed, it moved with him. When decor updated, it stayed. It wasn't explained to guests. It wasn't pointed out during interviews. It was simply there. And that silence is the proof. Because Wayne talked about almost everything in his career. Politics, war films, the Western genre, masculinity, patriotism. But he almost never publicly unpacked the emotional weight of The Searchers. Not the doorway shot. Not the confrontation, not the humiliation, which tells you something. If it had just been another harsh Ford moment, Wayne would have brushed it off in interviews the way he did dozens of other on-set arguments. Ford was famous for pushing actors. That wasn't new. What was new was what it unlocked. Film historians today point to the final frame of The Searchers as one of the most studied images in American cinema. Ethan Edwards, framed by darkness, the family inside, the door closing on him. It isn't triumphant. It isn't mythic. It's lonely. And that loneliness feels real because something in Wayne shifted that day. By the end of his life, Wayne had won an Academy Award for True Grit, ironically for playing another aging, hardened Western figure with cracks showing beneath the surface. But the doorway scene came first, and the director's chair remained. No press tour explanation, no memoir confession, no dramatic retelling. Just a quiet artifact in a private office. Today, that image, the chair, the doorway, the desert, stands as a reminder that some of the most powerful moments in film history weren't created by comfort. They were carved out of confrontation. John Wayne didn't stay on that set because he enjoyed being humiliated. He stayed because he trusted the man who had built him. In an industry that rewards ego, image, and control, he chose vulnerability, at least once. And he let someone he respected strip away the armor. That's not weakness. That's trust. Ford didn't need the Duke that morning. He needed the man underneath. And here's the question that makes this story personal. In your life, who would you let see behind the myth? Who would you trust enough to let them call you out, publicly, if it meant becoming better? Wayne never marketed that moment, never used it as legend-building mythology. The director's chair wasn't a trophy, it was a reminder. If this story hit you, drop one word in the comments that describes what Wayne did that day. Loyalty, courage, humility. I read everyone. And if you want more stories like this, the ones Hollywood left between the frames, subscribe. We post every week because legends aren't made in the spotlight. They're made in the choices no one sees. Next time, the actor who turned down the biggest role of his career to protect a friend, and the secret deal that saved both of them. You won't believe who it was. See you in the next one.